Tonight, under siege. And in the dark, nature tightens its icy grip on Ontario and Quebec.
CTV News with Lloyd Robertson.
Good evening from Montreal. Much of central Canada is paralyzed and praying for heat tonight. Forecasters had warned us this would be the worst day so far in this onslaught from nature, and boy, were they right this time. This vicious storm is pummeling Quebec and parts of Ontario. And two of our own had a first-hand look today at the awesome power of this ice. CTV's Genevieve Beauchemin and her camera operator were reporting on the storm on the outskirts of Montreal in an area that is particularly hard hit. A hydro tower came crumbling to the ground, buckling under the staggering weight of the ice. The tower brought with it power lines attached to the massive steel structure. The CTV crew was trapped, wires surrounding them on all sides. After hours of waiting for help, they were told it was safe to leave the area. Genevieve will tell us more about her harrowing experience later in the news. The wide-ranging effects of this devastating storm are being felt across much of eastern and central Canada. In Quebec alone, more than 1 million households, that's up to about 3 million people, left without electricity. A state of emergency has been declared in about 20 communities in eastern Ontario, including the nation's capital. Fallen trees and power lines have closed countless roads. Even a border crossing to the United States in Prescott, Ontario was shut down. And the storm, now in its third day, is being blamed for at least 6 deaths. For those left in the dark and the cold, a sense of helplessness can be hard to fight. People are left with little more than warm thoughts. But help is on the way. CTV's Rosemary Thompson reports.
The Army is rolling towards Montreal, 2,500 troops to help restore power to a region that is in almost complete darkness. And they're bringing beds with them.
We evacuate the population to help the Hydro-Quebec maybe to get to some remote regions.
But some people refuse to leave their homes.
It's me.
With trees crashing, Susan Gruber heads for cover. But when she gets there,
That's the alarm.
The smoke. That's why it's the smoke.
she's lived without power for nearly 3 days. She can't leave because she lives in an area that's prone to flooding. So they fill buckets. It's so cold you can see Kieran Gruber's breath. The fire department arrives. Feeling the chimney, everything's okay.
This one's okay, there's not too much.
3 houses burned in this neighborhood today. Every fire began in the chimney. Fire departments are warning people not to use their fireplaces 24 hours a day. There's a risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. This apartment block was evacuated because of carbon monoxide gas. Seniors left their home and ended up in a city bus.
Those fumes, they have no odor to them, and they can kill you.
6 people are dead. Some hospitals closed operating rooms when power failed. They turned to generators.
We're seeing carbon monoxide poisoning. We are seeing trees falling on people's heads.
Thousands are heading to the shelters. This storm has dealt many a bad hand.
If I'd had power, I would bring them back home, but I don't think there's any power yet.
And the power may not be restored till Monday. So some people curl up in a corner. Others have nowhere to go. The hotels are full. At Central Station tonight, 130 people are sleeping in a rail car itself, hoping for a more comfortable bed tomorrow. Rosemary Thompson, CTV News, Montreal.
Days of shivering and just trying to keep warm have left many people here exhausted, none more so than the Quebec hydro workers. They're restoring power as quickly as they can. But as Paula Newton reports, in many cases, they are treading on thin ice.
In the eye of this storm, seeing is believing. It's mind-boggling how the heavy ice has mangled, even toppled hydro towers. And when the ice is doing this to steel structures, trees haven't got a prayer. All people can do is dodge the debris and look on as yet another limb deprives them of power and the basics.
And this is what people see when they look out their windows. Ice 2 to 3 inches thick now, bringing down more wires every minute. Makes it impossible for hydro crews to keep up.
We don't seem to get anywhere.
But they soldier on. Hydro-Quebec is drafting any trained body it can find to work 16-hour shifts.
Start this morning. I'm retired. That's why they called me back this morning.
3,000 crews are on the road now after a convoy of hundreds more arrived from south of the border to help out.
Devastation.
Ever seen anything like it?
Not this bad.
They told us 4 days and we left home, but I can see a week probably.
Yeah. Hydro-Quebec agrees. They say their customers are now at nature's mercy.
We're expecting this kind of weather for another couple of days, apparently. So some people will probably go through the weekend without power, I'm afraid.
Every place is quite urgent right now.
Mathieu Tremblay's home is surrounded by a tangle of downed wire, but even he says there is little point in repairing anything right now.
I don't think there's much they can do right now, because if they repair one place, it can just fall back again in 5 minutes.
The crews are persistent, though. By radio, they keep track of new, even dangerous trouble spots, like this area south of Montreal where a woman was rescued from dangling live wire. Crews continue to cruise the streets looking for messes they actually have a hope of untangling. Right now, every gust of wind can bring more catastrophe, as if there wasn't enough already. More than 1 million homes remain blacked out, leaving about 3 million people without power. If hydro crews have any hope of catching up by the weekend, the weather has to give them a break. Pauline, CTV News, Montreal.
The Prime Minister is keeping close tabs on this storm. He's in regular contact with Premier Lucien Bouchard and Ontario Premier Mike Harris. He's also pledging assistance to storm-ravaged areas.
Depending on the level of help, the federal contribution increase up to 90% of the cost. So, that will be settled in due course according to the nature of the disaster.
The crisis here has also prompted the Prime Minister and the Premiers to delay a trip to Latin America. They will now leave on Sunday instead of on Saturday. And still to come in tonight's news, crisis unresolved.
We need the help.
Closed captioning on CTV is brought to you in part by Mazda. Retooled, refined, reborn.
Continuing with our coverage from Montreal, this major winter storm has much of eastern Ontario in its grip. Up to 20 communities have declared states of emergency, and for the first time ever, our nation's capital. It was practically paralyzed today. Government offices were shut down, schools were closed, businesses were closed. CTV's Jim Munson has this report on how Ontario is coping with it all.
In the villages, towns, and cities which dot the landscape of eastern Ontario, there is a crisis.
We don't have no powers. We got no more food like in the freezers, and we got little kids, and some people, they're sick. We need the help.
In Kingston, it looks like a war zone. By local standards, this is an insurance agent's worst nightmare. Even the international bridge between Canada and the United States was closed. The worst storm to hit this region in more than a decade have prompted more than 20 municipalities to declare a state of emergency, including the regional municipality of Ottawa-Carleton.
We have at least 50 to 60,000 homes without power throughout the region, and the number is on the rise.
It seems there is not a street in the nation's capital which hasn't been affected. In this fragile environment, everybody is pitching in to help others.
Hi, Meals on Wheels?
When Meals on Wheels had to stop delivering because of the storm, volunteer Kalita Lyon just had to help.
Oh, you're not staying? No, I can't stay. I have another meal to deliver.
That's too bad.
It's against this backdrop that the Premier of Ontario responded to the emergency.
Help is on the way. We are supplying food and shelter and assisting in those areas.
Just a second, please. I'm losing you, but I'm getting the gist of it. So the local farmers.
The phone hasn't stopped ringing at the Ontario Emergency Measures Organization.
Slow, the wires are down over the road.
The picture was no better on the expressways in eastern Ontario. This is the 417, the main highway between Montreal and Ottawa. But today, nobody was going anywhere.
There's 2 tractor trailers pulled over there. They're spun out.
They got the road blocked off.
For some, trying to get to the airport, time was running out.
Where are you heading for again?
Acapulco, Mexico, in the warm weather.
As for the weather getting any better here, it appears there is no relief in sight until the weekend. Jim Munson, CTV News, on the highway between Ottawa and Montreal.
Let's take an overview now of this massive storm that has pummeled eastern Ontario and much of Quebec. It's a slow-moving, low-pressure system now headed in a northeasterly direction. Forecasters say the system is weakening somewhat as it moves across the Maritimes, but a final wave of freezing rain and ice pellets are expected to hit the Montreal area sometime tomorrow afternoon. But it's not just Canada that's being hampered and hammered by these winds and bad weather. The northeastern United States is also being battered very hard by this storm. The states of Maine and Vermont are caked in ice. 150,000 people are without power. And elsewhere, a witch's brew of wicked weather. In the southern U.S., the problem is flooding. In Tennessee, a would-be rescuer was swept into a raging river. He was later saved. In Georgia, tornadoes tore small towns to pieces. And in southern England, a rare twister touched down, damaging hundreds of homes, and more tornadoes pummeled parts of northern France. And one other weather note, 1997 was said to be the warmest year on record. In fact, since records were kept at all. That's due in part to global warming, weather people say, and also to the effects of El Nino. I'll be back a little later in the newscast with the story of a terrifying incident that caught up one of our reporters today. Sandra Rinaldo will be here with other news of this day, including the latest appointment to the Supreme Court.
Ready to turn things around.
So it's basically just try and keep the main roads clean and clean up the lines and that.
Still, there's nothing they can do about turning the power back on. Even though there's a local hydro company, it depends on Ontario Hydro.
We manage it, but it's no fun, you know, in the dark. It's no fun.
So Roger Francoeur will keep his driveway clean and his wood stove burning and wait for the last of the storm to blow over. Susan Harada, CBC News, Castleman, Ontario.
Halfway between Toronto and Montreal is the city of Kingston, Ontario. 120,000 people live here, and today here is a cold and treacherous place. Homes, businesses, city streets crippled by the ice that just keeps building. And around every corner, damage that just keeps getting worse. The storm trouble started around midnight. Now more than 70% of the city is without power. Live wires heavy with ice are everywhere. Heat? Yes. Hotels can't keep up. In fact, the only places with rooms are places without power. It's so bad that city officials declared a state of emergency for the first time in Kingston's history.
Right at the moment, it wouldn't matter how much people power I had. This task is so overwhelming that we're going to be many, many days sorting it out.
The magnitude of this mess is made even worse by the fact that Kingston Utilities only has 15 field workers. They're bringing on as many people as possible, but still, homes are losing power faster than they can restore it.
It's quite a situation, that's for sure. I don't think Kingston's ever experienced anything this drastic.
There are big concerns here. The sewage treatment plant and the water purification plant are operating on backup generators that can only last so long. And there are elderly and sick people in the city who are cold and frightened and alone. Some called ambulances to take them to the Hotel Dieu Hospital, which is doubling as an emergency shelter.
I was getting kind of shaky. I think the cold was getting to me.
If I walk outside and have a fall, my bones are so brittle that I've practically had it.
Here they're getting food, shelter, medical attention, and company, while much of Kingston heads into its second night in the grip of the dark and the cold of a vicious ice storm. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, Kingston.
Proclaimed.
There's a crisis in the White House.
Tomorrow.
At the beginning of the news tonight, we showed you a picture of hydro towers crashing down like dominoes, one after the other, in a very scary scene. CTV's Genevieve Boschman was there for that unbelievable sight with her camera operator. Genevieve, as we look at the pictures again, explain to us just how it happened.
Well, basically, we were on this side road just getting some visuals of the scenery, and all of a sudden we heard this noise, and we turned our camera towards this massive steel tower. and all of a sudden we heard more noise, and we looked at it and we saw the top of it was just coming down slowly, and all of a sudden it started crashing. So it was just unbelievable. And that there was a moment of hesitation where I know a camera operator and I talked about it afterwards, and he said I wasn't sure whether to run or just stay put. And he decided to stay put, which was a good decision because the massive hydro tower brought down with it all kinds of other poles, snapping poles, and all these wires came down crashing all around us.
And you were trapped there for how long?
Well, we were trapped there for several hours, actually, because we were right in the middle of this. There was these massive high-tension wires around us, so we didn't know whether we could move at all, whether we could take our truck away. We contacted Hydro-Quebec, and they assured us that it would be okay, and finally some people in the neighborhood came to...
Pretty scary. Thanks very much, Genevieve. The wind is coming up again. It's a brutal night for weather here, and that's the kind of day it's been this January the 8th. We'll have more on this storm on Canada AM, updates on CTV News 1. I'm Lloyd Robertson for Sandy Ronaldo. Good night from Montreal.
For having an experience like that.
Yeah, but they will be worried.
Compañía,